Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to be learning about Sukkot today. We're going to learn one aspect. There's so much to learn about Sukkot. We're going to learn one aspect, and the theme that we're going to develop is unity. And we're going to see it manifest in many, many, many different ways. Very, very beautiful way to look at the Chag, the idea of unification and unity. So what I'm going to give over is in no particular order, but we're going to see this idea of unity manifest again and again in different ways and dimensions. So we're going to start with, there's a pasuk that says, Kol atzmotai to'amarna Hashem. All of literally my bones will praise you, Hashem. And in many, many different commentaries, going way, way back, they apply this to the Arba meaning, to the four species that we take on Sukkot. How do we do this? We're told that each of the four species relates to a different part of the body. And therefore, when we hold all four of them together, it's like all of my limbs, all of my bones are praising you, Hashem. Because this is a very active mitzvah. Shaking the lulav is not only will we holding them, but we're shaking them to the different directions. So our whole body, all of our limbs get involved. So we're told that very, very quickly that the lulav, the palm branch, which is very straight because all the branches are closed, that represents the spine, the backbone. The etrog represents the heart. The hadas, the myrtle, represents the eyes because it's shaped like an eye. Each of the little leaves is shaped like an eye. And the aravot, the river willows, are shaped like the mouth. They're longer. They're longer. So we have the mouth, the eyes, the heart, and the backbone. And so, but when we unify them, we put them all together, then we perform the mitzvah with our whole body. Dwelling in a sukkah is one of the only mitzvot that we do with our entire body, because we have to be in the sukkah. And it's compared to being in a mikvah. You have to be completely immersed in a mikvah for the immersion to be a kosher immersion. And it's the same thing about being in a sukkah, that we have to be, our whole body is in the sukkah. So this is the first level of unity, is our whole body is unified in praising Hashem. Then we're told that the four species represents four different type of Jews, and that altogether it creates the congregation of Israel. So we're told it's a combination of smell and taste. So we're told that the etrog has a beautiful smell, and it has a taste. I mean, if you like lemons, but actually my wife usually after Sukkot makes etrog vodka, that we put the etrog in vodka, and it changes its flavor completely to be like a lemon etrog. So the etrog represents a person who does mitzvot and learns Torah, has taste and smell. The aravot, the ones that are shaped like the mouth, we're told they don't have a smell and they don't have a taste. So that represents someone who doesn't learn Torah and doesn't do mitzvot, but they're still part of the congregation. They're not expelled. They're also part of the nation. And then you have the hadas, the ones that are like the eyes. That has a beautiful smell, but no taste. So we're told that that's a person who has, I'm trying to remember which one is the Torah and which one is the mitzvah. They have only one of them. Either they learn Torah, but they don't do mitzvot so much, or they do mitzvot, but they don't take time to learn Torah. And the willow, the lulav, the palm branch, is just the opposite. It has a taste, but it has no smell. So here we have the full gamut of Torah and mitzvot, from someone who has it all, and someone who has nothing, and someone who is just part of Torah and mitzvah. But all together, because we're holding the four species together. So we're recognizing that here, being a Jew is much more than how many mitzvot you do and how much Torah you learn. It's like you're still a Jew. You're still part of the nation. So that's a different type of unity. Then there's an expression in the Talmud that says it's fitting that all of Israel could dwell in one sukkah. The sukkah has dimensions to it. It can only be what's called 20 amas. An amma, this is an amma, a fist like this. This is 2 amas. That's 3 amas. It can't be, excuse me, it's not amma, it's cubits. Excuse me. A cubit is approximately 1.5 feet. It's less than a half a meter. So it can't be over 20, because then the schach, the covering, would not be within eye view. You'd have to like lift up your head. It's supposed to be that if you're looking ahead and you just lift up your eyes, you can still see the schach. But as far as, and it has to be at least 7 amas, which is like very, like this big. You could make a sukkah this big, enough to literally stand under, and you'd be in a sukkah. But there's no dimension of how big it can be as far as width and breadth. So the Gemara says it would be fitting for all of Israel to dwell in one sukkah. In other words, there's some aspect of Sukkot that encourages, that has the energy of unity. Now remember, Sukkot is coming after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when really, in a sense, you have the most people coming to synagogue. Actually, I saw an amazing film in Israel. There are many, many people who, for different reasons, don't like going to a synagogue, but they are attached to tradition. So different organizations organize Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur prayers in open spaces. So I saw like one of the famous circles of Tel Aviv is called Dizengoff Circle. And it's in a very, very secular part of Tel Aviv. So one of the organizations arranged for there to be Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur experience. And I saw there were thousands of people. Thousands of people came to be part of Yom Kippur, but in like a more informal kind of way. So this idea that all of Israel, it would be fitting to be in one sukkah. So here we have another aspect of unity. Now, before we shake the four species, that in most prayer books, there's what's called like a Yehi Ratzon. May it be your will. So it's a whole paragraph. I'm going to read just one part of it. So it says like this. It starts like this. May it be the will before you, Hashem, my God, and the God of my ancestors, that the etrog, in English it's citron, the palm branch, the myrtle, and the river willows, that when we take them in our hand, they represent the letters of the four-letter name of God. And then it says, "V'tekarev echad el echad, v'hayu la'achadim biyadi." So it says that when I take the four species in my hand, it's like I'm unifying the four letters of God's name, and I am now part of that unity in my hands. But it's in my consciousness that I'm now part of the unity of God. Like it says in the Shema, "Hear, O Israel, God, our God is one." That is really the mission of the Jewish people in the world, is to spread the knowledge and consciousness of not only that there's one God, but there is oneness in the world. So that's a different type of unity. And that's every time that we take the four species to shake them, we say this intention that we are unifying God's name, and we become part of that unity. So that's yet another aspect of unity with Sukkot. Now there's another one that is very, very connected to the temple in Jerusalem, and it's part of our prayers, and it's part of the sacrifices. On Sukkot, once a year, we would bring, along with other offerings, we would bring 70 offerings for the 70 archetypal nations. And on the first day of Sukkot, we would bring 13. And then the second day, 12. And the third day, 11. And until the last day of Sukkot. But when you added all of them up, it equals 70. So this meant, up to now, we've been talking about, okay, so Dara just explains here that actually, I'm going to look at this again. 1 second. So that the lulav is Torah and no mitzvot, and the hadas is mitzvot but no Torah. So thank you very much. So continuing. So here, up to now, we've been talking about the unity as it applies to the body, the unity of our consciousness with God, the unity of different types of Jews, the unity that all of Israel can dwell in one sukkah. But now, all of a sudden, we have a unity with the whole world. We're bringing offerings in order that we should be at one with the world, because that is the hope that when the Mashiach comes, there will be a unity in the world. So this is very, very significant that on Sukkot, we are, it's not only that we're bringing offerings, it's an expression of our desire that if not now, that at least in the future, we will be one with the world. Now that is expressed in the Haftarah. The Haftarah is the special reading that we have from the prophets that we have every Shabbat and every holiday. And every Shabbat and holiday, the section of the prophets that we read is connected to that Torah portion or that holiday. So the Haftarah that we read on the first day of Sukkot it's one of the most dramatic prophecies among all of the prophets. It's in Zechariah, the 14th chapter, verses 1 through 24. If anyone wants to look it up now or later. We, of course, do not have time to go through it all now, but I just want to read. It's also very messianic. The beginning describes, it's not the only prophet who describes this, but this is very, very dramatic. The last battles before Mashiach comes. And we're not going to describe it here, but it's somewhat traumatic, the events around Mashiach coming. And afterwards, a spring of water will come out of the Temple Mount and will sweeten all the waters of the world. Towards the end of the prophecy, it says like this: and it will happen that all who are left among all the nations that come up to Jerusalem, because it's saying that after the final wars, the whole world will come up to Jerusalem. So it's saying they will ascend every year to prostrate themselves before Hashem, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. And then later it mentions again that everyone in the world will, after Mashiach comes, will come up to Jerusalem for the holiday of Sukkot. So Sukkot now represents, in a sense, the ultimate pilgrimage of the whole world, because at that point, Jerusalem will become the spiritual center of the world. In a certain way, it is already and has been for thousands of years. But after Mashiach comes, there's a special idea of coming up for Sukkot. And that's why we read this prophecy on the first day of Sukkot. And what's interesting is, I don't know if it's happened the last 2 years, but for many, many, many years, there is the what's called the gathering of the nations. It happens every Sukkot. Approximately around 10,000 non-Jews from around the world come to Jerusalem in order to fulfill this prophecy. In other words, these are lovers of Israel. And there's always a huge parade. My wife and I have been there at least 2 or 3 times. And it winds through the streets of Jerusalem, and they end up at the Western Wall. I'm talking about 10,000 people, with many, many people lining the streets, like a parade. But what's interesting is the gathering of the nations. They march according to their home country. And in many instances, they wear traditional dress of their home country. And I don't know the exact number, but usually in the parade, you'll have representatives. Some of the groups may only be 10 people. Some may be 100. Some might be 500 from a particular country. And they're all waving Israeli flags, and they're singing Hebrew songs. It's an amazing, amazing thing. You could probably Google it and see some videos from previous years. So here is a whole other dimension of unity that's intrinsic to the holiday of Sukkot. Now, here's even another connection is that if you remember the story, when the three angels who originally Abraham thought they were just three regular people, they came to him, and he was actually in the middle of a revelation from God. And Abraham, who was known for his hospitality and his deeds of loving kindness, so he would take in everyone and he would teach them about the one God. So he sees these three strangers, and the Midrash says, he very politely says to God, "Excuse me, God, but I have to take care of these strangers, these wanderers." He takes them in. In the end, they turned out to be angels, and they announced to him that he and Sarah will have a son. But at this point, he just welcomes them in, and he says, "Let me take care of you. I'll bring you a little water, and please rest under the tree." So the sages said, based on a very important principle that's called Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim, the acts of our forefathers and foremothers are a sign for their children, or they pave the way for their children, or they are archetypal actions that affect all future events. So the sages said, on the merit of Abraham bringing in the guests under his tree, all of Israel merits to keep the holiday of Sukkot. An amazing statement. But what they're saying is that what seemed to be a singular act by Avram many, many years before the Torah was given actually brought down the energy that would be transmuted or transformed into the holiday of Sukkot. And because Avram's main mission in the world was to teach about one God, so here is another type of unity that Avram reached out to everyone. There was no Jewish people then. He reached out to everyone in order to teach them about the unity and oneness of God in the world. So that's a whole other level of unity. And then we have another unity that there's a statement that says that the way you decorate your sukkah is, in a sense, the way you imagine your world to come. Dwelling in the sukkah is, in one sense, it's a very earthy, practical, down-to-earth kind of mitzvah. You move out of your house, you're surrounded with a roof of branches or leaves or similar parts of trees, and you have temporary walls. So it's like very, very down to earth. On the other hand, it transcends this world altogether. For those people who have the experience of dwelling in a sukkah, it's a heavenly bliss. There are moments in the sukkah that just take you to a different world altogether. We're told that the top of the sukkah, the schach, represents the wings of the Shekhinah, that we're embraced, we're surrounded by the divine presence. And so here is a different type of unity that's unifying this world and the world to come. Because the actual translation in Hebrew of the world to come, Olam Haba, in a sense is a world that is always coming. even though we think of it that there's this world chronologically, and then after we pass away, or at the end of this cycle of history, where the entire world will move into a different dimension altogether called the world to come. But we think of it as a chronological, linear type of way that it will unfold. But really, the world to come is also here. That's why it says about Avram. It says, Avram Zakein, Ba B'Yamin, V'Hashem Beirach et Avram Bakol. That Avram became old in wisdom, and he came into days, and God blessed him with everything. So there's many explanations of what that means. But one of them is, what does it mean to come into days? Was that Avram, his consciousness, he had one foot in this world and one foot in the world to come. For him, there wasn't really like a separation. It wasn't like a linear unfolding that at a future time there would be the world to come. He had one foot in the world to come. It's always coming. It's always here. In fact, Rav Ginsburg taught that what's called the pnimiyut, the inner dimension of this world, is the world to come, because it's here already. It exists in the present. So that's a different type of unity. And now one last idea. Some of you come to the Tuesday class, so we discussed this at length last Tuesday, how important it is to see that Sukkot is intrinsically connected to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's one flow, it's one energy. And even though we have this image that at the final prayer of Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah, there's what's called the final sealing, the gates close and the judgment period is over. The tradition is that it really extends until the last day of Sukkot, which has a special name, Hoshana Rabbah. And so it's very important that really the cycle of the new year is not over. In fact, it's going into a higher gear on Sukkot. And a lot of it is accomplished through joy and the shaking of the lulav and saying Hallel and dwelling in a sukkah it just increases, in a sense, a period of introspection and tshuva that we began all way back in Elul, in the month of Elul preceding Rosh Hashanah. So even though there's a certain image that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are over, but the process of beginning a new year is not over. It's not over until after Simchat Torah. So that's another level of unity, that Sukkot it's not like a holiday that is different than Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's just part of the same flow, but a different energy, a different way of expressing our closest to God, our New Year's resolutions. And that's why for many people, shaking lulav is not something that's done in 1 or 2 minutes. It is a very deeply meditative, prayerful experience. And I believe on our website, there'll be a lot of articles about Sukkot that will touch on this. And also for those who have the book, Seasons of the Soul, you'll see in Sukkot, there's a lot of different ideas to be thinking about during Sukkot. So we've come to the end of the class here. I'll end with a blessing, as I always try to do. So first of all, we should all have a very joyous Sukkot. and we should realize that we have a ways to go in the New Year process. And so whatever prayers that we haven't really finished, or any parts of us that feel somewhat incomplete, there is still time to finish the process of rebirth and renewal in the new year. So I bless everyone with a Shana Tova. And I'm just repeating that Ephraim, who saves me all the time, it also blessed everyone with a Shana Tova and a good Sukkot.